No, I didn't want to be responsible for holding.
The Freeman brought a present by this morning. And I think it was
Good afternoon, everyone. We're just setting up, so thank you for your patience, and we look forward to welcoming our author.
So I'm hearing that
You're
never like cold.
Yes.
I'll take a picture. I'll show it to you Tuesday.
He said industrial, like
again,
it's
it's
going to be
feeds
No,
directly.
massive.
It's bigger than a regular house. Back in bigger. It's about like this big
And
around.
what I'll do is I'll
You know.
monitor.
Yeah, it's meant for a construction.
Industrial.
It was big for what it was for.
Yeah.
Is it a shop there?
Yeah. Oh.
We're on already.
We're on.
No, it's they're really handy.
Gotcha. Perfect.
I thought I would use it more on the second floor.
Maybe it's good.
In a time, in one of those times yours, in that, was it out of here?
339.
I just one. Yeah. Okay. Oh, that's your book.
Yeah. Greetings, everyone. I'm Vera Warren Williams with Community Book Center, and I would just like to welcome you to our second program today in honor of World Kindness Day. Today is World Kindness Day, and we are glad to be collaborating with Kathy and Art Spot to host this very special welcome on a book boat. We welcome you. Thank you. And we are grateful that all of you have come to be with us and share in this special moment. So we're not going to take any time. We're going to go roll with it. Thank you.
Give it up for Vera Warren.
So my name is Kathy Randalls, and I have the incredible honor of interviewing Nobuko Miyamoto today. Nobuko is an artist, an activist, a healer, a mother, a grandmother. She was born in Los Angeles, California, and has traveled all over the world. Okay, maybe not the entire planet, but she has had an incredible journey that you can read all about in Not Your Butterfly, and we're going to talk about it some today. But she is a leader in our country. She's one of the main huge voices in the Asian American activist movement throughout our history. And she's going to talk about that today and many other things. So without further ado, Nobuko Miyamoto.
Thank you so much. Well, I'm going to just start with a small passage from my book, which I'll say that was inspired Grace Lee Boggs was a mentor of mine, and when she was almost 100, the last time I saw her, she said, Nobuko, it's time for you to write your book. And she said, it'll change your life. It changed mine. So I went home. It was December. I went home. This was 6 years ago. And I just sat down at the computer and obeyed her, her assignment that she gave me, you know. And little by little, I went from being a songwriter that writes 3 verses and a chorus to writing this book, which is my memoir of my 50 years in the movement and many more years of being a dancer and artist. And so I'm going to read the first few lines of the book just to give you a little background of who I am. I was born where I didn't belong. At 2, I became the enemy, a would-be spy, a threat to U.S. internal security. Soon, I was moved with 120,000 others who looked like me to a place grown-ups called camp, but it was no summer camp. So that was one of my first memories, was riding on my father's shoulders in Santa Anita racetrack, where it was a temporary holding, where they held 10 to 15,000 people until they built the permanent camps. And that was my first memory of coming into this world. So, yeah.
Terrifying. Can you talk a little bit about Not Yo Butterfly, the choice to, yeah.
Well, you know, originally that was not my working title. My working title was, what can a song do? Because I'm a songwriter, and most of my life has been about how can I use music? How can I use the arts to change the world? And so each chapter was sort of a song. It was the title of each chapter was a song. And it sort of, that helped me as a songwriter to sort of encapsulate an idea as I went along my journey. But the publisher of University of California Press said, no, you know, what can a song do? Just didn't sing to him. So what this Not Your Butterfly, finally we found, was a song that I had written recently, actually, because there were big flyers and posters around my neighbor and on the main streets of Madame Butterfly, the opera. And I looked at that and I said, are they still performing this, you know, stereotypical idea of what an Asian woman is, Madame Butterfly, you know, the faithful, pathetic geisha who was waiting for her European lover to come back and save her, you know. And so this was my response was a song called Not Your Butterfly. I'm not your butterfly. I'm not your picture bride. I am some woman who holds up half the sky. So that's how the title came about.
Yeah, and there's been so much since COVID appeared in our world and in our country in particular. You spoke about how there's been people thought that the Asian hate crimes that were happening over the past year were new, and you were like, yes and no. Would you like to talk a little about that?
Yes, well, what happened was that the fans of hate were just rekindled, but this was a very old idea of the yellow peril coming to this country and polluting it, and the hate against Asians was a very easy thing to bring back and blame for COVID. But in reality, in 1882, the Chinese Exclusion Act tried to keep Chinese people from coming into this country. It was the first laws against people not coming to this country. It was against Asians, and we were the yellow peril. We were going to take over this country, you know. Even and so things like we've been invisible. The things that we've done in this country have really been invisible, like building the railroads. The last picture of when the golden spike in Utah was put in place, no Asians were in that picture, but the Chinese labored to, and the Japanese also labored to bring the Southern and Northern Pacific railroads together. So we've been sort of though we've been here for more than 100 years, we've been a sort of invisible population in many ways, and our stories have been told by other people. They used our bodies to tell the stories they wanted to tell about us. So that's why I felt also it was important for me to tell my story, even though it's a personal story, my personal journey. I felt was also the journey of many Asian Americans. So that's why I wanted to tell it in this time. And it did, 2 months before the book came out earlier this year, in Georgia, 6 Asian women were murdered. And it took several days before we knew what their names were, what their stories were. And it was assumed that they were sex workers and just whatever people wanted to think. Who were these women? They were sort of faceless, nameless women. And so the book also took on another, reason for being. And I've been very busy in the last several months doing a lot of programs and telling stories and sharing my journey, which has not been a journey which is only about being Asian, but also about relating to many other cultures as we went along. Actually, my grandfather, who worked on the railroad, married against the law, married a white woman against the anti-miscegenation laws in the early 1900s. He married Lucy Harrison, and she was a Mormon, and she was, of course, thrown out of the Mormon church, and they also had a son. They had children, and then they were riding on this road. This is how far back terrorism against Asians went. They were driving along the road in Idaho, where their home was, and a car came and pushed their car off the road. And they had a pair of twin sons. I knew they had twins, but nobody ever talked about whatever happened to one of the twins, and my father and his brother. And one of the twins, I read in Ancestry.com, one of these little articles in a local newspaper that said that one of the twins got his head crushed under the car. And Lucy was also trapped under the car. Her hair was caught. They lifted up the car, and the child on the way to the hospital. And when they came back the next day to get the car was torched. So even this little country newspaper said under suspicious circumstances. So that when I read that, I went, oh my God, this was an act of terror in that day. And what could they do? They never talked about it. We didn't know about this in the story in my family. So these stories, just like camp, people didn't talk about it. People didn't want to terrorize their children in a way. They wanted to bury these memories so that we could feel that we're living in a normal world, which we weren't.
Do you remember when you first started being able to talk about camp?
I myself, all growing up, I never talked about it really. when I started talking about it, was actually when I started singing. I had a African-American a singing coach, Deanie Clark from New York, from Washington, D.C., and sitting around the piano and getting me to find my voice as a singer. We would trade stories, and he was telling me about growing up as a Black man in Washington, D.C., and how they couldn't sit on the floor, the main floor of the theater. They had to go up to the balcony. If you're Black, you had to go. I said, this is in Washington, D.C., this happened? And he said, yeah. And then I started saying, well, this is what happened to us. You know, we went to camp. And so that's how I started actually talking about it and seeing that Black people and Japanese people, we had something in common that I didn't realize before. And then, of course, I heard Black singers. He introduced me to Lena Horne and Billie Holiday and Nina Simone. And I realized, oh, wow. These are women who knows how to tell a story, and in a song. And it really, I had been a dancer up until that time, and so you know, I never used my voice, my speaking voice. Really, I used my body to express myself, and this actually coming to my body came out of this trauma of camp. When being uprooted, I didn't have a sense of where home was, because we moved several times from camp to Montana to Idaho to Utah, then finally back to Los Angeles. I was confused. I didn't really have a sense of a home or place. When my father took me and my mother, when we got out to a concert of classical music, and there I saw a whole orchestra playing beautiful music, and I just went flying out of my body. And this world of this led a life in a black and white or gray world, and all of a sudden everything became colorful and beautiful and powerful. And when I went home, I started listening to my father's favorite records, and I started dancing to his records. I was 4 at the time. And then my mother saw this, and she was a frustrated artist. And she took advantage of that moment and took me to a little podunk school in Ogden, Utah, and started me dancing. And dance actually gave me a sense of place, that in a classroom or on a stage, I had a sense that I could be myself or be more than myself, that I had a sense of being on the ground, on the earth, and expressing my feelings, which I had no idea how to do in the real world with other children or with adults. I didn't know how to do that. I was so quiet and withdrawn. And lately I've been thinking about what this meant, that people have trauma. You know, all of us in different ways have had trauma. And for me, having danced at that early age was a way of sort of working through my trauma of being uprooted. It gave me a sense of a power in my body, actually, because dance is a very physical, and you have to push yourself, you have to sweat, you have to work, you have to, you know, command your body in different ways. So that was a kind of training that gave me a sense of my own strength, and it was a healing process that I still feel through time, and looking at my grandchildren too, to seeing how trauma has affected them through time as people of color, how the arts are so important in that process of healing. Yeah.
Well, I think this would be a perfect time to read the passage
Oh,
about dance.
And yeah, but before you dive into that, I first met Nobuko in Minneapolis through a directing institute that was hosted by a theater company up there called Pangea World Theater and Art to Action, which is a theater company based in New York and Florida. Amazing group of people. And Nobuko led us in some incredible movement. She always woke us up in the morning with amazing somatic movement workshops. And we were also, one of the topics that first year that was really heavy on all of our minds and is still heavy on our minds today was climate change, environmental justice, all of the things that are being talked about in Scotland this weekend and all over pockets of the world. And Nobuko got those of us who were already making work about climate change and climate justice to come together. And she also wrote a song.
What was that?
There's no such thing as global warming. Shall we sing it?
Oh,
Do you
let's see if I
remember?
can. I don't know. Listen.
There's no such thing
as global warming. There's no such thing as climate change. Just because the water is rising,
just
learn how to swim,
and baby, you will be okay.
right?
And I remember because we asked if we could borrow it and use it in Cry-You-One. So that piece is, and for those of you who saw Cry-You-One, that piece was a very important moment in that piece. But I guess what I want to lift up here is that Nobuko, you have been through so much, and you have such a clear. You when you enter a room, you bring the sacred with you, and when you brought that song, you brought the profane as well. And I remember we were just blown away. Yeah, we were blown away by how you just could hold both of those so well, and make us all feel comfortable in the terror. So anyway, just a slight digression, but this passage is really incredible about dance and the power of dance.
Yes, and it's interesting because here I am, Japanese American, and when I came out of camp, those children, we were a generation that was called, I was Joanne, little boys were called Ronnie and David, and nobody had a Japanese name. Nobody took their Japanese name, even though Nobuko was my first name. Nobody called me Nobuko because we had to prove we were American. Camp taught us that. We had to change who we were to try, even though we can't change our face. But we had to try to prove. This was something that really was a stamp on us for many, many generations, even to today, that young Japanese Americans still feel the vibration of that moment in our history, that they have been affected by it and not accepting their own culture. So the first forms of dance that I studied, of course, were Western forms. So not only was my name changed, but also my body movements, etc. But this is a complex thing, It's colonization, but there's also beauty in these forms. So it's complex. But anyway, this is when I was about an observation when I was about 12 or 13. In ballet, you can't lie, you can't fake, you can't balance unless you're centered, you can't do multiple turns unless you're plumb. There's a technique to building and holding high extensions. It takes energy, physical strength, willpower, mental concentration, determination, discipline, visual perception. It takes strength to appear soft and gentle. It takes rigor. Now, there's all kinds of rigor. Athletes need physical rigor to win. Students need mental rigor to learn. Yogis need spiritual rigor to reach nirvana. I think a good dancer needs all three to be able to express emotions, physicalize ideas, and tell stories with their whole being. So, even though it gave me a language. Dance gave me a language. And it would be many years. I mean, I would take modern dance, ballet, mostly ballet, then modern dance, then East Indian dance. So I did study other forms of dance, but ballet and modern dance was my main, the staple of my training. But in show business, what were the jobs that I got, So the first job was in King and I played a Siamese court dancer. And then flower drum song, I played a nightclub dancer but a lot of things, flower drum song. The only time I ever broke the color line was in West Side Story when I passed for Puerto Rican. So really, the whole issue of typecasting became so frustrating to me, And I was standing on the stage in Flower Drum Song, and when we were on Broadway, and it was a matinee, and it was just filled with blue-haired ladies that came from New Jersey, not your blue-haired, different. But they were just looking at us with delight, And they were singing chop suey, da da da. I'm doing this, and I'm going like, why do I feel uncomfortable? Why are they looking at us like this? What is this? And then all of a sudden it hit me that we were chop suey. We were Chinese food for white people. We were what they wanted to see. And I felt like saying, hey, ladies, I'm not Chinese. I'm Japanese third generation. You put me in camp, remember? No, but of course I didn't do that. But that was my real turning point. I was 19 years old, and I started searching. What can I do? How can this change? Why aren't my stories on that stage? Nobody that we never performed anything that was like my story, my family story. And West Side Story certainly wasn't my family story either, but it was a story about people of color. It was a story about what it meant to be one race against another, and that I understood. So I was searching for something, and after West Side Story, I turned to music because I thought, well, I could pick a song that I wanted to sing. I could sing any song I wanted to sing. And it was with Deanie Clark, who really took the patience and believed in me to move to song. And from there, I was in a nightclub. You're not even interviewing me.
You're doing
so
great.
I was singing in a nightclub in Seattle. But the Vietnam War was going on, and I was worried about my brother. He's going to be drafted. He's going to go to Vietnam. What's going to happen? And then younger people were coming in the club, and one of them asked me, we're going to demonstrate next weekend. Why don't you come and demonstrate with us? And I was like, I just felt uncomfortable and I couldn't do it, even though I believed that the war was wrong. I just couldn't get myself to do that. But I was thinking, and that was a challenge to me. And then when I left Seattle and that nightclub gig after 8 months, I met an Italian filmmaker, and he was making a film about the Black Panthers. And he wanted to help, and I said, okay. And that's when I jumped in. 1968 in Los Angeles first, and went and saw Masai Hewitt speak and do a political education class in the community, and it was like, wow, powerful speaker. But also he talked about camp. He talked about what happened to Japanese Americans, and he said this could happen to us as Black activists. So they were already, and they were reading out of Chairman Mao's Red Book, and talking about what was going on, serve the people in their community. So there was already this sort of crossover of ideas between Black and Asian. And so, but I never met any Asian activists. I was thinking that, okay, this is revolution, here I am, you know. And then we shot something in New York City. We were at the Young Lords Church, what they call the Young Lords Church, with the Young Lords, the Puerto Rican version of the Young Lords of the Black Panthers had taken over this church in East Harlem, and they wanted to do a breakfast for children program there. And in that church filled with all these brown and Black people, there was one Asian American elder woman who came up to me and tapped me on the shoulder, and she said, "What are you doing here?" And I looked around and said, "What are you doing here?" And she said her name was Yuri Kochiyama. And Yuri was, well, I thought she was an elder. She was younger than me. She was probably in her 50s at that time. She lived in Harlem. She had raised 6 children in Harlem. After the war, she and her husband, he fought in the 442. He was one of those Japanese Americans that went into the war to prove he was American. But they lived in Harlem. They made a choice to live in Harlem and raise their 6 children there. And she became good friends with Malcolm X. So her political mind was moving, and she was living what she believed. She believed that if we live with Black people and we learn their stories, that we can move things forward. First, as a supportive, but then looking at her own self. She was then married Kochiyama, but then she took on her Japanese Yuri Kochiyama. So we were all doing that at this moment in the late 60s, early 70s. This was happening and she took me to a meeting of Asian Americans for Action. And there I met the 3rd generation, we call Sanseis, and for their 2nd generation Japanese Americans, Chinese Americans, parents and children, activists, all in the same meeting. And I'm going, whoa, I couldn't imagine my parents going to a meeting like this, talking about, we're going to fight against the Vietnam War. We're going to, the US-Japan treaty is bad, Ampo Funsai. Yeah. Yes, you know that. Yeah. Yes. So this was the beginning of me understanding that as Asian Americans, we were part of the struggle. And it so happened that we were going to meet Asians from the West Coast, East and West Coast were coming together for the first time in Chicago, 1970. And we were going to force the Japanese American Citizens League, which was sort of like the NAACP, to take a stand against the Vietnam War. Look what they did to us. Look, they dropped the bomb in Hiroshima. Look what they're doing in Vietnam. All the bombs are dropping in Vietnam. We have to stand up because these are our cousins. These are our aunties and uncles. And so it was there in Chicago. The young activists, we went to see the Black Panthers who had just lost Fred Hampton, and they greeted us like brothers and sisters. We met with Native Americans who were fighting for housing for urban Native Americans. And they sat us down and they did ceremony with us. And it would be 5 years of evil, followed by 5,000 years of good. And that change would come when warriors, all the colors of the rainbow, would come together. So we walked back to the church where we were sleeping on the floor. And that night, Chris Ijima pulled out his guitar. And he just started noodling around and playing. I'm going, whoa, this guy's pretty good. And he worked himself into a song. It wasn't a performative thing, but and then he didn't know I sang, and I just joined in, and we wrote our first song. It was just like a spontaneous thing. And the next day, we sang it at the big convention. The two of us sang in front of elders and activists. And afterwards, and even during, it was like something happened. That we realized, and they realized, that they had never seen people that looked like us singing our own song. I'm going to read this one passage, about that, because growing up Asian in America, we had the songs of our ancestors, but we no longer understood them. In our quest to be American, we often rejected the old music. We grew up hearing other songs that filled our ears and captured us, formed our styles and attitudes, even taught us to move differently. Some were cool songs that we embraced and that spoke our universal truths, but they didn't speak our experiences. They didn't give us a memory line that connected us to our own roots. We learned to see ourselves in them, in those who sang to us. In fact, we wanted to be them instead of who we were. We were a songless people. We were missing something that we didn't know we longed for, our own song. So after Chris and I sang that first song, it happened to be that one of the young activists from Stockton, California, in the hotel room was murdered. She got her throat slit. Her roommate went up there to find her, and the roommate got her throat slit also. The first young girl, she was 18 years old. She died in that hotel room. And when this happened, we didn't know if it was a threat. What was it about? We had visited the Panthers. Greta Hampton had just been murdered. It was and they never found whoever killed the first girl. So we went back to New York and we wrote a bunch of songs. We wrote 4 or 5 songs, and we did a concert. We did some Beatles songs and some other songs, and we did a full concert, Chris and me, and earned just enough money at that Buddhist temple with people who looked like our family watching us do this concert to go to the West Coast and go to the place where Evelyn, who had been murdered, and meet her organization and her family, and travel all over California. We went to San Francisco, to Stockton, to Sacramento, and we found out that we weren't just individual activist groups, we were a movement. We were the Asian American movement, and this music became a powerful way of communicating ideas and spirit that we had never had before. So in the next 3 years, Chris and I became troubadours and just went from town to town and place to place, rallies, prisons, even schools, and sang wherever we were asked. And at the end of that period, a folk singer, her name was Barbara Dane, maybe some of you have heard of her, a blues singer, had a small record company called Paradon Records. And we did a performance with her, and she said, I want to record you guys. And if it wasn't for Barbara Dane, there wouldn't be an album called A Grain of Sand, which is now part of the Smithsonian. And that music those songs that we made during that period would not be preserved, and it would not be taught in Asian American studies. So that sort of put the stake in the ground for me. It changed what I saw art could do in the world. I was trying to grow, climb up that pyramid, Broadway, the movies, whatever. But now all of a sudden that pyramid fell down. And I saw there was a horizontal way of making art. That we didn't have to have big budgets and big fame. We can just go out there and make our stories, make our songs, tell our stories, find the people that wanted to hear it, that it was important, and reflect those people in our community and those stories that we had never seen told before. So that became my mission for the next 50 years or so.
Yes,
Yeah.
amazing. I just want to call our attention to time. It's
Okay.
4:18.
Okay.
And yeah, so many questions. And I also want to give our beloved audience a chance to ask you some questions. I guess maybe just before we open it up to the audience, can you talk a little bit about can you talk a little more about where you are with that now? About before you said it, I was going to say, tell the story of the pyramid or the horizontal. So you went right there, which is beautiful. But how is that working? How do you see that working for yourself in terms of, so Nobuko is the founding artistic director of a dance theater company in Los Angeles called Great Leap. And y'all are celebrating your 42nd year on the planet. Give it up. To be an ensemble theater company alive on the planet in the United States of America for 42 years is incredible. And they've been based in the Japanese American Buddhist temple all those years. So it's really interesting to me that you had this journey and spent a lot of years in New York, and then you came back to Los Angeles, the complicated place that you were born, and decided to go deeper into building your community there and taking these dual tracks of the rigor of art and the rigor of activism and the insistence that everyone's stories need to be shared. Where are you with that? How do you see that in this country now? And is it working? What else needs to happen for it to work better?
Well, added to that is that having the temple, Reverend Kodani offer me the space in the temple, in their social hall, to teach dance, to rehearse, to create, was like an amazing gift, because it put me in a historical Japanese space, and where I could actually learn what I never learned growing up, the tradition, and being part of a community. But I also, at the same time, was raising a Black child, my son.
Yeah.
So I had like two things going on here. It was giving me the opportunity of supporting myself and raising my son, and also exposing the temple, that was Japanese American, to a mixed race kid who was running around and crawling on the floor, and my dance class, which was very mixed. And so some people would come into our sweaty dance class and say, what are these people doing? Who are these people? And Reverend Kodani he would never, kick us out. We were there to stay. And so in many ways, we changed the temple. We made them much more flexible and open to weird people like us. And that, Gamal, my son, could grow up in a world that he felt comfortable in. I mean, I had to also live and work in Leimert Park, which is an African-American community in Los Angeles, an arts community in Los Angeles. So that Kamau could see Black art and Black bodies and Black males and be in that atmosphere. So that was a very big part of my work, was already from the beginning, bringing different worlds together, because that was my life. So we did create musicals and productions that were about the Japanese and Asian American experience. At the same time, like when the riots of 1992, the uprising happened, there was a conflict there between Koreans and the Black community. It was very clear. Oh my God, they don't know who these people are. They have these stores. The Koreans have these stores in the African American community. They weren't hiring Black people. There was just a lot of hatred going on and fear, and actually murder, because a woman killed a young girl, Latasha Harlins, and she didn't go to jail. So there was a lot of tension, racial tension. So we started a project where Black, Asian, Latinos, we began to tell our stories on stage together. So we did our first voice stories, and we created a platform in which artists of different colors could begin telling their stories in tandem, and we could see a bigger palette of stories. And that led us into being from an Asian American organization into a multi-ethnic organization. And that's where we've been. And when 9/11 happened, my son, who then was in college, who became a Muslim and then a Sufi, then I became very involved in also educating and doing cross interfaith work to try to get people to understand what Muslim and what was going on with Muslims, to familiarize ourselves. Again, stories, we don't know those stories. These are foreign people, these are foreign cultures. So it's kept me busy through many, many years. And I also got involved, and why I love being here in New Orleans is that this is one of the few places in America that you feel a sense of cultural tradition is really important here. There is a real New Orleans tradition of music, and it's out in the streets, it's living, it's a living culture. And I never had that growing up until Reverend Moss asked me to write an Obon song, which is a circle dance to remember ancestors for Obo. Bonodori. And I wrote a song, Yui Yo, Just Dance. It was the first English Obon song, so that people like me who don't speak Japanese can understand why we dance in this circle. And Buddhism is really about oneness, about everything is interconnected. That's a very important concept of Buddhism. And the first time we did Yuyo, the dance, and I was singing on the platform, the Yagura in the center, there was 1,000 people dancing around. And we were singing and playing. And I got what oneness is about, what interconnectedness was about. We were dancing, we were being the sea of oneness. And that was a powerful, I could see why do we have this in our body, in our cellular memory? This exists within us. Why? How can we reclaim this? How can we let other people, African dancers, they do it. The drums, when you play the drums and dance, you're synchronizing heartbeats. So I happen to be lucky to meet Quetzal Flores, who's a guitar player and had a band, Quetzal, has a band, Quetzal. And And they're involved in fandango, which comes from Veracruz, Mexico. Music that mixes African, Spanish, Mexican, and indigenous in Veracruz. And they also perform around a platform called a tarima. They dance on the platform, and the musicians circle the platform. And when I saw that, I said, that's sort of like Obon, except we dance around the platform. And I said, what would happen if we put fandango and Obon together? And that's what started 8 years ago. We brought first the Mexican community and the Japanese community together to create, and we created a song called Bambutsu no Tsunagari. All things connected.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the next year we brought the African dancers in, and we created together in the circle. And we were learning African dances, they were learning Japanese dances, we were learning fandango dances, and then we were doing something together. Then we brought the Muslims, and they were doing Hadra and the chanting, and we had people spinning like the dervishes, but slowly. So we're experiencing what it means, like what happens in the streets and second line, when people just start moving together. This is a powerful thing. We need this in America. We don't need just to go to a performance and seeing people up there, again, the pyramid. We need to have the horizontal. We need to be in a circle. I'm going to read you this last thing. So, and then we'll go to questions. So, in an age in which most of us spend too much time observing the world through our rectangular devices, to step into the circle of fandango bon is a potent communal act. In this circle, we reclaim our power, our creativity. We make music with our own hands, our own voices. We circle the earth with our feet and remember we belong to it. In this circle, everyone is equal. Everyone is seen. Everyone has a place. In this circle, there are no borders, no us, no them. There is plenty of room for more circles. In this circle, we weave our many roots, knowing our diversity is our strength. In this circle, we are enacting the world we want to live in. In this circle. In this circle. So that, in a nutshell, is what this book is.
Yeah, and we want you all to purchase these books today, but we want to give you all a chance. We've probably got about maybe like 7 minutes for questions. If anybody has a burning question.
Okay.
I need 3.
Oh, Elliot. Okay.
I don't know if I'm appropriate in asking you, but how did you arrive at camp? Or how did your people arrive at camp?
There were buses and trains that took us there.
Why? Why?
Because Roosevelt made an executive order 9066 because we were a threat to U.S. internal security. That's what they said anyway. So illegally, they just swept us off into camp.
And were you with your own family in camp?
Oh, yes. Yes,
You were 2 years old?
I was 2.
What year?
1942.
Well, I don't notice any anger. I would be angry. I'm angry to hear such a thing. And I want you to know that. Very angry. I didn't know until I was much older. And I think it's a disgrace. And I don't know if the people here know that it was a disgrace for the United States to have done that. And I don't know if you all realize what it is. Okay. And so.
Thank you. Yeah, I was angry, and I am angry. But I've channeled my anger, and that has driven me for these many years, because I don't want to see children at the border right now in these camps. I know that they're going to suffer. They're going to suffer long trauma from being at the border. So there are Japanese American activists who were children like myself in camp, who are standing up for these children and fighting to get them out. And they did 2 years ago, there was a big demonstration at the border because they were going to put them into some of the camps that we were in. So it hasn't stopped.
Okay. I'm a folk dancer. I've been doing folk dancing since the 1930s. When I was a child, I did it at festivals, marriages, and bar mitzvahs and things like that. In those days, we had Jewish dancing. In 1947, the State of Israel was formed, and since then, they've been choreographing thousands of new Israeli dancing. I have a group here since 1986 of Israeli dance group. We haven't danced since COVID. I'm trying to get started again. And I would love to invite anybody to come to it if you like. If you'll give me your email address, I'll let you know what's happening.
So these circle dances are very universal. It's every culture from the beginning of time have done these circle dances.
Well, our dances we do all different kind of dances. Partners, circle, line, every formation you can think of. I also it's not my group, but we have a folk dance group that does dances from every country in the world. And one of the ones that we do is Tokyo Tansaki. And I'm sure you must know it.
No, I don't.
You don't? Because the Japanese community here, when they have their festivals, they do it.
Maybe they do. I don't know it. Yeah.
That's interesting.
Do you know it?
Tokyo Tansaki. It's like a mining song.
Oh, no, that's it. Dankobushi.
Dankobushi?
The Dankobushi.
No, that's a different one. We do that.
The Dankobushi is interesting. It's one of the first early dances that people brought over here. And I recently found, everybody knows it's a coal miner's dance.
Yes.
And most Japanese kids know this dance. I recently found out that it was written by women coal miners in Japan, that they were underground with a loincloth, just black bodies, coal, digging for coal. And they wrote this song. And it had many bawdy verses in it also. They came out sweaty and they wanted to see their lovers. And I was like, wow. But anyway.
All right, Jill, I think we got time for one more question or comment. If anybody, yes, Natasha.
Kathy mentioned that you're also a healer.
Is it what?
A healer?
Healer?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think she's a healer.
Please could you tell about this?
Well, I mean, for how I see it, I think that I believe that performance is and can be an act of healing, and I think that the songs that you sang with Chris Ujima, am I saying it right? Ijima. I think that was a form of, it was activism and it was healing. I think that your performances that you've made with your company have been acts of healing, and I think your description of this moment of the Fandango Bon and bringing 1,000 people together, I think that healing can and did happen for some of the people. It sounds like it definitely happened for you in that moment, and I think I have faith that it happened for many of the people who were present in that moment.
Is it the ritual?
What's that?
Ritual.
It's the ritual. See, you said one thing, but it's the ritual.
Yes.
That's where the healing takes place.
Absolutely.
Okay? Because that's where the story is.
Yes.
So I appreciate you, lady. You're 2 years older than me, seems like. But I can relate to everything that you said. I was in the civil rights movement here at 18, so I go far enough back to experience a lot of things.
Yes.
So
Those were life-changing moments.
totally life changing.
Yeah.
And spent 25 years in New York City.
Oh,
yeah.
What years?
1974, 75 to 1994.
Just missed
Okay.
me. I left in 70, at the end of 70.
And really bonded with the Asian community.
Did you know Yuriko Chiyama?
Maybe not by name. I'm horrible with names. I
Uh-huh.
always say I'm New Orleanian, so we bastardize names. but in terms of matter of fact, I had a show at Exit Art in '92. It's no longer in existence, and there was about 600 people came to that opening, and everybody was complimenting the fact that however I bonded in New York, there was every nationality in that show, so it made me feel very special. So, my name is Willie Birch.
Willie Birch.
If you asked about them in New York, I'm sure they'll know.
Okay.
Why? Yeah.
And did you know Mutulu Shakur?
No.
Just wondering if you.
But the art community, yeah,
Yes.
I'm a visual artist. So
Yes.
They know me.
Okay.
I have one more question.
All right.
You mentioned the Latinos, all the different minority groups. You never mentioned the Jews, the Jewish community.
Well,
why should she?
Because we have
no, because you all
very many things in common.
Of course, we all
yes,
have things in common.
of
So
course,
why would you point that out? So
Because
like
you
that.
mentioned the Mexicans, the Latinos, and all the different, the Indians. Why aren't we considered in the minority group like that? And we've had more persecution than anything else.
yeah, absolutely.
Come on, man.
I understand.
Come on.
Camp, we have more
But it was
common being in a
that's
camp
right. No,
there,
and
and
my-
we then go from there.
I was married, my first marriage was with a Jew, and that was one of my early awakenings, really, because they were very politically aware.
Sure.
And so, yes, that's part of my life too.
But you didn't mention it. It doesn't come up.
Well,
Is it
you
in your
mentioned it
book?
though, brother.
Is there anything
I
about
did.
Jews in the book?
Yes,
Yes.
Yes,
You
it
got to
is.
read it.
Yeah.
What?
You're included. All humanity is included. We're all included here. Because,
I'd rather not be, but
no, I mean, because we're about humanity here. And that's one thing, it's so easy to divide us right now. And the work really is to show our commonalities and how we work together and how we can exist together. Because basically, yes, this is one human family. So we are all connected. We talk about people, oppressed people and people of color because we weren't recognized, we were called minorities in this country when we are not minorities in the world. And we've been kept minorities in this country. But Jews have been allies with us always.
Always.
So I'm sorry if I didn't mention it.
All right, y'all, I think we're at time, but Vera we have a couple, before we part, we've got a couple more announcements. Vera's got one, and I wanna, as Vera's coming to the stage, and maybe Tarabu, you could come to the stage for a moment.
Yes.
Okay, so Nobuko
Come
has
here,
an
Tarabu.
incredible
Come here.
husband who's hanging.
Come
You
here.
gotta just show us your face, please, just so the people know who you are. So,
Take your mask off.
so this amazing flyer features both Nobuko and the reason that Nobuko and her husband Tarabu have come to New Orleans is for the film festival this weekend. And Tarabu has a film that has one more showing tomorrow night at 6:30 at the Broad Theater. It is called 100 Years from Mississippi, and it is the story of his mother, Mamie, who lived to be 111 years old. So for my 90-year-olds in the audience, y'all ain't seen nothing until you see Mamie Kirkland. And she returned to Ellisville, Mississippi, 100 years after her family fled because her father was threatened with lynching. Anything else you want to say about it,
That's
sir?
the story.
Come see the movie at 6:30 tomorrow night at the Broad. And please don't leave here without getting a copy of Not Your Butterfly, so that you can hear more for yourself. The incredible. So she's an amazing dancer. She's an amazing actor. She's an amazing organizer. And she's an amazing writer. This is her first book. So give it up, y'all, for and our host, Vera Warren
Williams.
I'm so sorry.
I know.
It's there.
We are so happy that you come here, and I appreciate all that you shared with us for all of our allies. And as I was listening to the last exchange, we just did a piece with young people where all are welcome. And so we want you to know that all are welcome here, and kindness doesn't cost anything. So working together in the work that we've done and continue to do, it's important that we have allies and that we do support each other and one another in the work that we do, not only to improve and better our own communities, but the planet, globally. So thank you again for the opportunity. We appreciate you sharing your story and your life. We do have a few copies of the book available today, and if for whatever reason we should run out, which I hope we do sell out, you can purchase a copy. Nobuko will autograph a book plate, and we will make them available for you at a later date. But you don't want to miss this story, and it's an excellent book to share with others for gifts and just to have general information.
This is a gift for you, Vera.
Oh, speaking of gifts, thank you.
Thank you so much
for having me. One of these appreciate it. By the summer, I'll be. Oh,
yes.
Thank y'all again for coming.
Thank you so
Do
much.
you have any more t-shirts?
Pardon?
Do you have any more t-shirts?
I don't.
Next time.
Next time, I know.
Well,
Yeah,
you might be able to fit it. No.
What are you reading, sister?
No, I'm just saying you're slimmer than I am.
You want to show me the
You got four.
I buy two.
I want to show
I'm gonna bring you guys back to the
Yes.
I want to show you. That's my grandson.
Okay.
Publishing his book.
Oh, okay.